Hello, everyone. Today, I want to give you a short introduction to another online resource that you can use to research the history of slavery in the Americas. And that's a database called Slave Voyages at slavevoyages.org. I'm going to share my screen with you so that you can see what I'm seeing at slavevoyages.org. This is a database that's run out of Emory University, and it's really robust. It's got a lot of different parts to it. If you scroll down, you can see there's a database of ships that were involved in the transatlantic slave trade. So this is data that's coming from shipping records, from letters, from a lot of different sources and being compiled here. About 36,000 voyages are documented. There's also documentation for intra-American slave trade. So that's enslaved people who are traded from one Caribbean island to another, for example, or brought from the Caribbean up to the North American colonies. So when we've talked about people like Isaac Royal or Thomas Oliver, who had plantations in Antigua and then sometimes brought some of their slaves up to Boston, that would be sort of this intra-American slave trade. There's also a database of names of people that are preserved in these records and image galleries from the records. But if we scroll back up to the top, what this database does really well is it's got some great maps and visual data visualizations to help make the data easy to comprehend. So just the very first map here will show you the volume of where these voyages are starting and ending, where they're going. So you can see here for all voyages between 1500 and 1900, actually a pretty small arrow here shows us what ships are coming directly from Africa to the North American colonies and later the United States, but that there's a tremendous number of ships going into the Caribbean and into Brazil. So you can look at that map. There's also, there are lots of maps here that show the data in all different ways, where captive people were from, where they went to. There's also a pretty great time-lapse video that will show this data in an interesting way, if we can get it to load. All right, so if you go to time-lapse, this will show you the ships from the 17th century through the 19th century, where the ships came from, where they went, and what country they were registered to. And so it's a really great overview to sort of just think about how the slave trade changed over time. Here, let's zoom out a little bit so you can get an overview there. So the different balls, and I'm going to make it a little faster just so we can get through the 17th century here. So you can see the different colors of the dots are where those ships are registered, whether they're Portuguese, British, French ships, and we'll see the volume where they're going. So you can see some of these dots coming up to mainland North America, and those are mostly red dots, mostly British ships. But most of the volume is going here to the Caribbean and down to Brazil, especially those green dots, which are Portuguese ships going to Brazil. So this is the middle of the 18th century. You can see that the number of ships is really increased from the 17th century. And as things happen in these various places, the nature of the trade will change a little bit. So we're coming up here on the French Revolution. You see all those dark blue dots going into Haiti. But after the French Revolution, we'll see those blue dots really disappear as France substantially drops out of the slave trade. And then when Great Britain outlaws the transatlantic slave trade in the early 19th century, we'll see those red dots drop out. And so now we've got a lot of Portuguese ships, Spanish ships, and a few others. But this is just time-lapse to sort of help visualize this data for you. But I would like to show you how to use the database itself, which has a lot of information about these 36,000 voyages. So I'm going to go to the database. When you go to the database, you'll see that there's lots of information about each ship. There's the vessel name, where a voyage began, where it ended, the number of enslaved people who were kept on board, and also things like the ship owners, the investors. Now, All of this data is taken from many different sources. Some of it's from shipping records, some of it's from letters, some of it's from newspapers that are announcing that ships are coming in. So a lot of the data is partial. So there are a lot of data fields because the data for that ship could include those things, but it doesn't always include those things. So there's a lot of partial data about these voyages, but it still offers a good place to start looking. I recently did a project about two brothers from Rhode Island whose last name was Vernon, and so I was able to see by just searching vessel owner Vernon, I was able to find a lot of the ships that they owned. So you can change how many rows you see here. I'm just going to show you that. So the place where the voyage began, these two brothers were from Newport. So you can see a lot of these voyages are beginning in Rhode Island. Where they go in Africa, sometimes the records just say Africa, but sometimes they're more specific. Sometimes they will tell you that they're going to Sierra Leone or to a particular city or region. And then where those ships went. So the Vernon brothers ships went all over the place, to Charleston, to Antigua, to Martinique, and here's the dates and the numbers of people enslaved. And if you click on one of the voyages, like if you just click on one of these here, you'll get the expanded information. So we can see here that this vessel, Othello, was owned by three people. The Redwoods were another family in Newport, and William Vernon, one of the brothers that I was researching. You can see that this ship started in Rhode Island, went to the Gold Coast, and then sold enslaved people in Barbados before coming back to Philadelphia. The dates, the captain's name, the number of people who were taken captive in the Gold Coast, and then the number of people who were sold in Barbados. So you can see that there's a death rate there. And then at the bottom are the citations. So you can search this data in a lot of different ways. You don't have to search by the owner's name. You can also search by the place, and that might actually be useful for us to search by the place. If we just want to see voyages that are starting in Boston, for example, we can do that. Let's see, Boston. Let me expand this a lot. There are a lot of, we've got 175 vessels that we have information for starting from Boston. Interesting. Let me just put these in date order. So you can see that there are some voyages in the 17th century, a lot in the 18th century. But then something that's really interesting is that even though Massachusetts outlawed slavery in Massachusetts in the 1780s, that these voyages go past the 1780s. So these ships are leaving from Boston and going, from the Gold Coast to Jamaica with 311 captives in 1791, right? So that's after slavery is not legal in Massachusetts anymore, but these ships are still involved in that trade. And if we go and we look at some of them, this one down here, this is 1858. Like, that's really late. We go and we click on that, and we see this name, Charles Rauch, and he's one of the vessel owners. And if you go look him up, there's a case with Charles Rauch. He was someone who was doing a lot of illegal transatlantic slave trading in this period, 1858, right before the American Civil War. And he's bringing enslaved people from Congo River to Cuba. This is in Cuba. Yeah, so you can look for a lot of different things if you're looking for a particular ship owner, or a particular port like Boston, or a particular year, right? If you want to see all of the documented slave trade voyages in 1726, you can use it to do that too. So this is a really great database. It's also really extensive. It's got a lot of data, it's got a lot of visualizations, timelines, videos. So I really encourage you to look around. And if you have any questions about how to use it, because it is kind of a little bit tricky, but I'd be happy to help you use this. But it's something that could be good for your research. All right, so good luck. Thanks.